listening to Midday with Maria Shilaos. A massive 8.8 earthquake rocking eastern Russia and causing a tsunami warning across the Pacific. Security footage capturing the moment that quake struck. Joining me now to talk more about this quake is Keith Koper. He is the director of University of Utah seismograph stations. Keith, thanks for being with me. Now, this quake went from an 8.0 to an 8.7, 8.8. Can you remind our listeners how the reading can change after the quake is already done?
Yeah, what happens is more data. It takes, it can take several hours for all the data to show up. And so what happens is, we try to get a magnitude out as soon as possible, but we refine it over time just as more of the seismic data becomes available. And so you're right. Right now, it seems that it's settled in at about an 8.8, which, of course, is giant.
Yeah, I was going to say, put it in perspective for us. I don't remember the last time I heard of an 8.8.
Yeah, it's one of the top 10 biggest earthquakes that's ever been recorded. So there was a magnitude 9 earthquake that happened in 1952, almost in this exact same place. So it's not completely unexpected, but an earthquake like this is only going to happen every decade or a couple decades. So it's quite unusual.
So tell us about the fault that this quake happened on.
It's what we call a subduction zone. So it's a thrust fault, and it's basically 600 kilometers long. So it's quite long, and there's part of the Pacific Plate, which is a big tectonic piece of the crust, and it's basically rubbing up against Asia and sort of subducting or diving underneath that continent, and that's why you have sort of these volcanoes that are just sort of adjacent to where this earthquake happened.
Right. Any idea how far away this quake was felt?
Oh, I think it was felt, let's see. So I think it was felt at least 1,000 kilometers away, and it's being recorded. It's big enough that it's being recorded all over the world. So, basically the Earth is going to continue ringing or sort of shaking for probably a couple months. And nobody can feel that. It's quite small. It's on the order of sort of nanometers or billionths of a meter. But when you have an earthquake this big, the ground is going to keep shaking and moving for quite a long time.
Okay. Now, you mentioned this volcanic area. We are seeing reports that a volcano erupted after that quake. So did it trigger that, or how is it connected?
Yeah, it's unclear. The relationship between these giant earthquakes and the volcanoes is it's still not well understood. So there probably is some relationship. We certainly see little tiny earthquakes that happen sometimes right before an eruption, but it is possible that the stresses and the shaking from the earthquake actually did have some connection to the volcanic eruption.
Okay, so talk to me a bit about the ring of fire that exists around the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, so this is an area where we get all these giant earthquakes. So, for instance, Alaska is part of it. Japan, if you remember the big earthquake in 2011, in South America, so along the west coast, so sort of Chile and Argentina. These are all similar faults, and again, it's one of these subduction zones, and so the crust, this big tectonic block, is sort of running into an adjacent block and sort of diving underneath. And this is where we get the world's biggest earthquakes. And as you mentioned, we get the volcanoes as well. And so that's, and because it's sort of around the border of the Pacific, sort of in a circular shape, that's why it's called Ring of Fire.
All right. Thank you so much for being with me. That is Keith Koper. He's the director of the University of Utah seismograph stations. Tsunami waves have been hitting the U.S. West Coast for hours, causing minor damage in California. They came from an 8.8 magnitude quake off the coast of Russia yesterday. ABC's Alex Stone is in Los Angeles.
In many areas now, like in Hawaii, tsunami warnings have been downgraded and evacuation warnings have been dropped. Early this morning, people began going home. At this point, there is no known damage in the U.S., and there was no massive wave or series of waves like you'd think of in Fukushima in 2011 or in Southeast Asia in 2004. Sensors have picked up some waves of like 4 or 5 feet, but they've been mostly very small. There will be an assessment done in places like Crescent City in far northern California near the Oregon border. That's often prone to tsunami damage in that area because of geography, but so far no damage is being reported anywhere in the U.S.
Alex Stone just mentioned one town that is prone to tsunami damage, Crescent City, California. Midday executive producer Andy Cupp is actually from that town. He grew up there. And Andy, that means you didn't get much sleep last night.
No, I did not.
Tell us a little bit more about what happened since that alert went out yesterday. Is your family okay?
Yeah, my family's fine. My parents and my grandparents live outside of the tsunami evacuation zone. But like you said, I stayed up way past midnight, way longer than I should have, streaming the local radio station there, watching reports from the National Weather Service. Parts of the town, which is about 7,000 people or so, were evacuated overnight. Beaches and parks along the ocean are still empty today due to ongoing waves. Fishing boats headed out to sea throughout the night, finding safety on the open water. Crescent City and Del Norte counties were the last part of the United States to be under a tsunami warning, the highest level of an alert for a tsunami. That was just finally downgraded to an advisory late this morning. Matthew Kidwell with the National Weather Service in Eureka, California, says people in Crescent City still need to be aware of the potential dangers that might still happen.
Strong currents through the day. I would expect through a lot of the day, you'll need to be especially cautious of the ocean.
And the harbor master in Crescent City, Mike Rademacher, says that a dock was washed away by the waves several feet high.
As the water levels continued to rise, the structure was unable to adjust, and the decking became lodged on the pilings and was eventually submerged, and this resulted in major structural failure and complete separation of the dock.
A local news outlet called Redwood Voice reported overnight that a small fire had broken out near that dock as well, but it was quickly put out.
Okay, just a single dock destroyed. Not as bad as it could have been, right?
Exactly, and it's always better to be safe than sorry in these situations. You know, this area of California is known as a tsunami magnet. So in 1964, 29 city blocks, hundreds of buildings were destroyed late in the night on Good Friday by a tsunami that had been generated by a 9.2 earthquake in Alaska. 11 people lost their lives in that one. And then I was actually living in Crescent City in 2011 when the Sendai earthquake from Japan sent a tsunami all the way across the ocean. The town was evacuated then, schools canceled, roads closed. Fishing boats tried to leave the harbor before the waves came in, and not all were able to do so. I remember seeing video of the last fishing boat that was trying to make it out, and you could see it trying to get over the surges as the waves were coming in and pounding the harbor. It was only about 8-foot surges, so it doesn't sound like a huge thing, but that completely destroyed the harbor, along with a lot of fishing boats, causing about $50 million of damage. One person did die in that tsunami, being swept out to sea near the mouth of the Klamath River.
The tsunami warnings, advisories from this quake stretched around the Pacific Ocean late into the night. Now, luckily, coastal communities didn't see any major damage, and in the U.S., no one reported to have died.
Yeah, and there are tsunami warning systems all over the rings of fire, as you were just talking about. For people who've never lived on the coast, or for people who do like to go and visit the coast, there's a lot of things you should be looking for and paying attention to when you're visiting there, regardless of how long you're visiting. For my travels, you'll usually see signs that you're entering a town that say something like Tsunami Ready Community. That's a really good sign that this area has been hit by tsunamis before. When you get to those places, though, look for those tsunami evacuation route signs. They will be everywhere, and you will see them off of the main roads, and they will tell you where to go in case something happens. And so you want to be looking for those well ahead of time, as soon as you get there, because when something happens, you don't want to be looking around trying to figure out where those signs are. And then when a tsunami warning happens, you'll usually hear loud sirens, and nowadays you'll even get a push alert to your cell phone telling you to get to high ground. Highway signs tend to display a bunch of warnings as well, and law enforcement, this is a really cool thing. They will go out of their way to the beaches to make sure no one is down there. So they kind of put themselves in harm's way to make sure that no one else is down there. It's a whole process, but a lot of these communities are familiar with this. I know in my hometown, they did monthly tsunami tests so that people were prepared and ready for this.
Okay, but tourists definitely are not ready for this. Now, as someone who's lived through a tsunami and an evacuation, what would be your biggest piece of advice?
My biggest piece of advice, be prepared and don't be stupid. If you feel shaking, get to high ground. And even if you don't feel shaking, if the alarms start to blare, get to higher ground. There were several videos, and ABC News interviewed a few people who had decided to stay at the water yesterday. It's a terrible idea. Do not go to the water to see what's happening, because there's a very good chance you won't make it out alive.
All right. Midday executive producer, quasi-tsunami expert, Andy Cupp. Thanks for doing that for us, Andy.